All right, what's up, y'all? This is the Journey to Paid Speaking Gigs podcast, and I'm getting ready to bring on a special guest, Andrew Davis. Now, Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey man, thanks so much for having me, Charles. I'm psyched.
Yeah. So, before we get started, just let the Thrive Tribe know who is Andrew Davis.
Yeah, well, I'm a professional speaker and author. That's all I do. But in the old times, I used to travel, around the world
Right?
speaking. Did about 50 events a year,
Yeah.
and yeah, now I'm doing lots of virtual events. So I don't know, probably 70 or 80 last year, and we'll do about the same this year. And yeah, I mean, audiences range from I don't know 20 people to 5,000, 6,000 people. So it's been really, really fun. But before that, I worked in television. I worked for the Muppets in New York. I wrote for the Today Show. I started my own marketing agency in 2001 with a journalist friend of mine, and we sold that in 2012. And that's when I really kind of transitioned into speaking as a full-time business.
Yeah.
And 2013 was a rough year. I learned a ton in 2013.
I mean, there's so much craziness I see in that story. Like you work for the Muppets. Like, how was that experience for you, first of all?
Well, it was my dream job. I actually, as a kid, I always wanted to work for the Jim Henson Company. And I'm one of those people that, like, if you set a goal, like, just, you don't stop until you get there and you kind of make your own luck. So
Yeah.
for 3 years straight, I wrote a handwritten letter and FedExed it every single day to
Wow.
the executive in charge of production, a guy named Peter. And he finally said, look, stop sending the letters. And I said, I'll stop sending the letters if you just give me a half hour of your time. So I drove down from Boston, which is where I was living at the time. And at the end of an hour and a half meeting, he offered me a job if I could start in a week. So I quit my job in Boston and
Wow.
moved to New York. And it was a really interesting time for the Jim Henson Company. To be totally honest, I didn't love the job. It ended up not being my dream job, which is always a little deflating.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, all those
but
letters you sent out to them.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It was a lot of work, and I learned a ton. I think that's the best thing I could get from that experience.
Yeah.
Maybe not, because I also met my wife there, so
Nah,
it was
that's
a
dope.
really great opportunity. To kind of be in the television and film business and
Yeah.
work in children's television, which is what I wanted to do. But yeah, but I wouldn't do it again, even though I learned a ton.
Right. So, I'm curious, how did you meet your wife?
Well, I was in charge of building well, not building the puppets. I was in charge of the workshop where they built the puppets. So my job was to make sure, Miss Piggy was on set at the right time and Grover had the right costume on. And she
Yeah.
was in charge of all the talent, the actual Muppeteers that do that stuff. So it was basically we had to coordinate a lot. And she ended up getting me asking me to take. I basically had to be a Muppet wrangler. So she told me, hey, we need Elmo down on set at Sony Studios tonight. Sorry for the last minute. And I couldn't find anyone to do it. So I just said,
Yeah.
oh, I'll do it. So I got it down there, and it turned out it was with Tony Bennett and the Backstreet Boys for a VH1 special called Storytellers. Do you remember that show, Charles? You may be too young to remember that.
Yeah. I don't know if I know anything about that one.
It's
Just
all right. It's all right. Some people listening will remember that show, and it was pretty awesome. And so I was a huge Tony Bennett fan at the time. So I told her, this was awesome. Let me take you out for dinner, and we went out for dinner. And after that, 20
Yes.
years later, yeah, we're married. So
Yeah, that,
it was awesome.
that's incredible, man. Sometimes the things that you thought was going to be the best thing end up being something else that allowed you to see, like, this was the moment I was looking for. And so,
That's so true.
so tell me about your story. Like, I'm curious to know about before you hit the stage, what's your story behind you? You, Andrew Davis, the one who's on the stage, speaking in front of thousands of people each year, tens of thousands of people each year. What's your story?
My story is kind of just, I kind of consider it a quest, like an adventure, because every time I thought I had a really clear goal and a vision for what the future was going to look like, It didn't turn out the way I had planned, and just like any good
COVID.
adventure movie, yeah, it's you kind of have to like adjust along the way.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
but what I realized pretty quickly was the prior experience that I had, even though it wasn't what I expected it to be, ended up being unbelievably valuable and taught me something or empowered me to do something I never knew I could do before. And I would end up using those skills later on in life. Like, for example, when I was a kid, I was really into acting. I was a childhood actor, and I did like, television commercials and theater and
Yeah,
radio. And when I was really young, I thought I want to be a movie star.
yeah,
And so, I learned a lot. I took a lot of acting classes, and I took improv classes. I was in my improv troupe in college. I thought that would be awesome. And, I didn't become an actor, but 20 years later, after graduating from college and not doing improv for years, I found myself being invited to speak at events and using all those skills I learned as a kid on how to act or be
wow.
in front of an audience. And so I feel like all the little adventures
Right. Yeah.
and the twists and turns are the magic. That's what really makes it
Yeah.
exciting for me.
Yeah, I feel you on that because it's like those different callings that's on your life. Sometimes you might be doing nonprofit work, and then that nonprofit work end up being something that you turn into videography, and videography returns something that you actually learn how to bring yourself. And then after all of that, it's like, well, I can put all of these pieces together to do what I'm about to do next. And
Exactly.
and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's exactly right.
So I think the
Yeah, I mean,
movie. Yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I think, my all my experience in television, which was great, and I learned a ton in television. I didn't really think I'd ever use when I got into the marketing world. I knew I was leveraging my ability to tell stories when I worked as a marketing guy, and was doing client work, but I didn't really think about the stuff like the production equipment and all that. I was like, I'm never going to use that again. But obviously, when all the events went to virtual events, I was like, well, wait a second. I've been shooting a YouTube series for 2 years, and I've got all this stuff. Why don't I just set it up and use everything I've learned in television to create like a virtual television show for virtual events instead of just kind of a Zoom call
Yeah.
and with some slides. So it's
Wow.
been really, really fun to see that old learning applied in a new way.
Wow. Yeah. So true. So true. So you work with the Muppets from MTV. When did you realize that that was a story that was worth sharing? Because I feel like
Well,
some of the people that listening to this podcast, they might be new to speaking, and when was the opportunity for them to like fully step into it and embrace this next season of like speaking and impacting people's lives?
yeah,
I think we all are kind of unsure of when is it right? When is the right time? When did you realize that your story was
yeah. Well, look, the right time is whenever you've got something worth sharing. But for me, I don't actually share my story on stage. To be honest, I don't think many people are interested in my story. My like when I look at the landscape of speakers out there, and when I talk to event organizers, there are basically four categories of speakers they're looking for that keynote slot, right? There's actors and astronauts and athletes, right? And Charles, you probably fit into that, right?
Yeah.
That's like their top tier. They want, they want Charles Barkley or Magic Johnson or Serena Williams to headline the conference because, or an astronaut. That's who they want because the big name will draw in a lot of people. Well, I'm none of those things, so I cross that off the list. Like next on the list, you have what I call the A-list alternates, right? You're not as famous as those people, so generally you can think of those people as you don't know their name when you recognize it, but the next 4 to 6 words after their name, you're like, oh, the chief innovation officer for Tesla. Like that's cool, right? That's an A-list alternate, and you want to hear from that person. You're gonna show up to that session. Well, I'm not that either. I mean, no one cares that I've worked for the Muppets. I mean, thousands of other people have, and it's not that exciting from a messaging standpoint. So it's not going to draw in the crowds either. The third one is what we call the industry icons, right? Like those are the people that, like if you're speaking to the restaurant industry, they're just as famous in the restaurant industry as Michael Jordan or whatever,
Yeah.
because they founded Chick-fil-A. Like, that's a big deal in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Well, that's not me either. So
Where
the
are you
fourth
at?
category, where am I, right? Like, there's no place for me. The fourth category is what we call the surprise and delight speaker. And that's the person that they put on the agenda because they've seen them speak before and they know they deliver outstanding, outsized value. And they usually position them right after one of those A-list, speakers. So I was just spoke at an event before all this happened, where it was Magic Johnson and then me, right? Well, everybody comes to see Magic Johnson, and he provides so much fun and value and insight, but it's really about Magic Johnson, and you get to hear his stories, and it's unbelievable. It's an awesome experience. But if you want to provide value to the audience, the next keynote has to drive home a new innovative idea and teach them something that they came there to learn. So for me, I fit squarely into the surprise and delight speaker. And that means I don't actually share my story on stage unless it's in a Q&A and people ask me questions like, what was it like to work at the Muppets?
Yeah.
But usually it's really about how can I challenge the audience to think about some conventional wisdom in a brand new way.
Yeah. I think
that was a long answer.
No, that's totally cool. I think you hit on something that will surprise a lot of people who are looking to speak. And that is, you don't have to be the absolute best. You don't have to be the top shelf to make a business for yourself, to build a successful speaking business. So whether you are that mother who's taking care of kids and you care about anti-bullying, well, there's a lane for you for that. Or whether you are
Absolutely.
that world-class athlete, there's a lane for you to that. But I think the best thing that you can do is hone what you truly care about. Because when you do that, that's authenticity, right? That's when you can step into that room and people resonate with you. They know what you're talking about. They understand your message and you're providing value. So yeah, thanks for like breaking that down. Like I really like the way you broke that down. So kind of talk about what's your secret to keeping the audience engaged. We talked about there's so many different layers of the different types of speakers. So you don't fit into that top tier, but
No.
you fit into a tier. So how do you keep them engaged when you're coming from the fourth category?
Yeah, well, number one, you have to have a high entertainment factor. All right, like, and entertainment that doesn't mean it has to be funny and jokes. So, like, you just have to be able to engage the audience in an entertaining way, and that means you have to create an experience. So those are the two big ones, right? It's got to be entertaining. It's got to be an experience, and like, if you break that down, that means that all the I think if you're going to turn this into a career, and really get more referrals every time you speak, you've got to have a signature bit. So for me, every one of the speeches I've crafted has a signature bit. It's like a 5 to 7 minute segment. It's what people talk about. It's what they remember. So one of the first speeches I ever gave, and started getting paid to give, was all about the changes in the media landscape. And my signature bit is often referred to as the meatloaf journey. And it's not just there for fun. There's a deep message in the meatloaf journey. And if you haven't seen it, you can Google meatloaf and Andrew Davis and you'll find it. There's lots of videos about it. But let's see, almost 10 years later, I still get people calling and saying, hey, we want to hire you to speak. I saw you do that meatloaf thing in 2013 and we want to have you back. Can you do meatloaf again? It's kind of becomes your,
meatloaf,
yeah, exactly. So you got to have a signature bit, and you've got to focus on the performance of it, because there are plenty of people that will get up and speak, but there aren't. If you don't have a high entertainment factor, you're kind of stuck. And there's one other thing I should tell you. There's also, like, I have a formula for this. We call it the fee factor: fame, entertainment, and expertise. All right. So you've got to be famous at some level, and we can dive into that if you want to talk about like how famous you need to be. But the entertainment and the expertise are the other key pieces. So you got to have a signature bit. It's got to be performed well. And on the expertise side, you've got to have a visionary idea. For me, Charles, I don't believe it's good enough to just get up there and talk about how bullying is bad, or like, that's not enough. You've got to have a new way to help people think about and then challenge their Exactly, and solve the problem. I think you need to have a hypothesis on how they can change their behavior so that you can change the world. So
Yeah, and that's a common theme that a lot of the speakers we bring on to the podcast we talk about. People just don't want to hear the story, right? They want the transformation. How can this apply to
yeah,
my life? What value is this going to bring for me? And how we merge that together? That's the thing that's going to allow us to get booked again and again and
yeah.
again. So
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah,
talk.
I
Yeah,
think,
go ahead.
oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it's really, you have to be careful about sharing your anecdotal expertise, right? Like, unless you're Magic Johnson, it's hard to get an audience of 5,000 people to care about you. Unless you're Serena Williams, they're not waiting for your first words out of your mouth, right? They're skeptical from the moment you get on the stage.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
for
so
for
true.
most of us, yeah, I challenge you to as a speaker, think about even telling other people's stories first, and it'll help you feel better about where you're going, and you'll be surprised at how well those stories resonate and really do help teach the lesson. You're the vessel, the vehicle. You're like the investigator looking for new answers to an old problem, and you'll earn a ton of trust with the audience.
Mm.
And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. So what would you say, because I know you are marketing expert here and you talk a lot about those things. What would you say is the difference between marketing yourself and marketing your speech?
Yeah. Look, here's the deal. The speech is the product, right? At the end of the day,
On the
and
stage.
you don't get keynotes, you earn them. So, I think if most speakers spent the same amount of time, if not more, if they traded the time they're spending trying to build their personal brand and their profile in the digital world and their marketing assets, if they took half of that time and said, you know what, I'm going to stop doing half of this, and instead I'm going to invest that half of that time into the speech itself. I'm going to make the speech better. I'm going to look at the old videos of me speaking. I'm going to record every one of my virtual
Pause on that
events.
part right there, because
Oh,
let me tell you, people don't like to look at their speeches. Okay,
I know. I
it's the
hate
most
it.
painful thing that we can do, but when you do it, that's the thing that allows you to grow. Like you
Exactly.
can't grow what you don't know.
Love it.
I
Yeah,
don't
you
even know what that is.
cannot.
Yeah. So
That I love that. I have like 1,500 hours of video of me speaking, and I have just to prove that it never gets any easier, Charles.
yeah.
I every time I watch myself speak, my body has a physical reaction, and my eyes start to water. Like, it's so sad. It's a real problem I have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so important that I do it, that I do it within 24 hours of every speaking gig. I will watch it back.
Yeah.
I take some notes about what the problems are, what's not working, why didn't that joke land? And then I spend a week just working on 1 minute of
Mhm.
that speech to make it better,
So
or 5 minutes of that speech to make it better.
I think you got to be in a certain space to do that. What do you do? What's the method that you use in order to hit that submit button or press play so that you're not being overcritical or I would say negative about yourself, but more so giving yourself constructive criticism?
Well, I think it comes from doing it over and over again, right? Like, I'm at the point at which when I hit play, I'm not looking at myself going, man, like, you should lose some weight, which is what I did when I first watched them. I would say, like, oh man, is that what I look like? Like,
Yeah.
I gotta do some push-ups. Like, I remember the first time I opened up one of these videos from an old event. I was wearing a suit I had bought in Copenhagen like 2 years ago, and the buttons were like working really hard trying to
Ooh,
keep
ooh,
my gut
yeah.
in. And I was like, I got to get a new suit. Like, once you get over
Right, right.
looking at yourself, you start looking at what the value you're providing. And here's the other tip. I alternate between recording the audience. So I put a camera up and it just records the audience, and then the next gig I'll put the camera up and I'll record myself. And when I'm recording the audience, it's great because I'm looking at their reaction to what I know I'm doing on stage.
Yeah.
And when a joke doesn't land, it's really helpful. I'm like, oh, that woman found it funny. This woman didn't find it funny. I wonder what's wrong with this joke. Or
And maybe it
uh,
might be a cultural thing too. Like I noticed too. I am more attractive up north. Like pe- people love to book me up north for some reason. Like I, especially during the COVID, like especially during this pandemic, virtually, I'm getting booked. Canada, I'm getting watched. Like why is everybody booking me up there? I don't know if it's like a cultural thing, based off your location. People are attracted to certain speakers, but that I'm curious to know, like for you, are are your jokes landing at different regions of the world? Or is it something that you
well,
got to change?
yeah, no, it's something. Well, like the majority of my gigs are domestic gigs. Like I would consider that like North American gigs,
Yeah, yeah.
with the exception of Mexico. I do like one event in Mexico every year, maybe two.
Hmm.
Um, so as long as I know the jokes work for a North American audience, I stick with them. But when I'm speaking internationally, I cut the jokes. I cut most of them,
Mm,
because there's, especially if it's an audience where it's going to be like asynchronous or synchronous translation,
yeah.
the jokes just don't work anymore for me. So I have to cut them. But I'd be surprised. I think one of the reasons you're finding yourself booked in the same areas is because you've probably got a referable speech that people are referring to other people they know in that area,
Hmm.
not just because they like you. It's
Yeah.
just they're friends with friends nearby, and that's one of the big reasons you're finding yourself booked that way.
Hmm.
Because without they're called stage side leads in my world. Like you got to kind of end every event with this expectation that you're going to get 3 or 4 more
Yeah.
leads from the performance you delivered,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
and that's what builds a sustainable business for me.
Yeah. For sure. What would you say? What percentage of those events? Getting a little static.
Oh, for me? Sorry. Oh, that
Not
might be
sure.
this.
Oh yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Sorry.
That's great. No, all good. All
I'm
good.
not using my fancy machine over there. Okay, all right, I'm good.
No, I mean, this is the podcast world. Welcome to our home slash
Yeah,
office,
exactly.
all of that good stuff.
Slash studio slash yeah.
Yeah. If you could talk to one speaker like that you respect in the game, who would that speaker be, and what question would you ask them?
Oh, I get this one a lot. It would probably be Tony Robbins.
Okay. Okay.
And I know a lot of people kind of frown on that kind of enterprise and stuff, but I'm in, I've seen what he's built, and I certainly kind of admire his ability to read an audience and deliver a message that empowers people to change their lives.
Yeah.
And I think dismissing that is easy, but we should all try to learn something from people like that, and put those insights to good use and
Sure.
change the world in new and exciting ways. So I don't know what I'd ask Tony Robbins. That's kind of a tough one. I
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would probably um, I I yeah, I don't know. I appreciate that question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll think
We can
about it.
always email me later. I can post it
Yeah,
in
yeah, exactly.
the.
That's right. You can post it in the blog post in the
Yeah.
comments.
They're
I'll think
wait they
about it.
they're waiting on Andrew's question. What would that question
Yeah.
be? You know. Cool, man. I really enjoyed today's podcast, but before we go, let the
Yeah.
Thrive Tribe know, where can we find Andrew?
Yeah, sure. You can find me. My website is akadrewdavis.com, and my email address is at the very bottom of the page. So if you have a question, email me. My phone number is there. Give me a call. I'm on Instagram fairly often and LinkedIn. So just search for me on either of those, Andrew Davis. I'm at Drew Davis here on both platforms, I think. And yeah, those are probably the best ways to reach out to me. And yeah, that's that. Let's start there.
Let's do it.